Welcome to the Penny for Your Thoughts podcast. This is your weekly insight into the small businesses of London. Today we're going to be talking to Aaron Humphreys, who's the co-founder of Intrface. Hey Aaron.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, absolutely.
So, Intrface. Let's chat a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of background. I'll try not to waffle too much. So I've been in product design, user experience, visual design for the past 15, 16 years. Myself and my business partner set up Intrface predominantly to help startups with user experience design and innovation. We also service SMEs, but predominantly focus on startups, early stage, pre-seed, and seed startups normally. What we help them with is a range of different things. We sit in the middle quite nicely between an agency and a consultancy. So we do the work, but we also advise as well. So we run workshops like design sprints, and we have a few of our productized services. And we do the work as well. So we deliver on the work. We've been going for about 3 years now. Had the opportunity just to work on some, incredible businesses and to work with some incredible startup founders. And here we are.
Cool. Now you guys have such a cool startup vibe yourself, and something that actually attracted me to you guys for the podcast was your LinkedIn posts and your working culture. So it'd be interesting to know what you think the pillars are for a successful startup, because it seems like you've got one going yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. So I think the three main things personally that I think lead to success is, number one, validation. If you're an early stage startup, the one thing you should be probably focusing on is getting early validation. And what that looks like is some sort of indication or conviction from your clients that you're designing and you're building the right solution, that you're focusing on the right problem as well. Typically, that's where we advise all startups to reframe their problem and focus on that in particular. So it's kind of number one is validation and product market fit, which arguably one is a little bit more difficult than the other. The second one is to be customer centered and to really hone in on the customer and understand their needs, their wants, and their behaviors. And really, you can only do that by talking to customers, right? There are tons of other frameworks and quantitative and qualitative ways of getting that information, getting that insight. But really, I think just talking to your customers early stage for validation, and then later you can weave in user research. And the third, I would say, is great UX, right? Balance between how delightful the product is to use, coupled with tack sharp visual design and interface design. So I would say those three things: validation, product market fit, being customer centered not just as a co-founder or a founder, but across the startup, across the employees as well, and great user experience.
Okay, so imagine that someone is building their startup, they don't have any customers yet to talk to.
Yeah.
Who should they go to?
Good question. You need to start with some sort of profile of your customer, because you need to understand who you're going to be targeting. There are a number of ways that you can do that. There's a book called Lean Startup that you can read that will help you identify that. There are other frameworks like customer development frameworks. You can create user personas who will give you an idea of who those users are. Really, you need to have an idea of who they are and schedule interviews to really understand what their pain points are, what their needs and wants are, and what their motivators are. So you need to start from somewhere, right? So you need to start from having an assumption, and then you need to interview users to either prove or disprove what your assumptions are. And from there, it's a case of just iterating and refining those user personas and who those customers are. That's typically a great place to start.
Got it. And at Intrface, you guys have a couple of things. When I was stalking through your website, there was a couple of things that stood out to me that were slightly different to how I've seen some other companies operate. One of them was something.
Glad you said that.
One of them was something called your outcome-centered approach.
Yeah.
Talk us through that. What is that?
As it sounds, it's very literal. So we think about the end objective. So we almost start at the end. Like, where is it that we need to get to? This is before any discussions happen with regards to deliverables or outputs, whether that's wireframing or prototyping or any preliminary research. We start at what the objective is, and it might be something as simple as working with a SaaS platform, for instance, and they want to reduce the calls that their customer service is getting. That, for instance, would be an objective, and we'd be designing whatever the solution is for that particular outcome. So that's really what I mean by being really like outcome focused and outcome driven, and then working backwards. So starting with the what and the why. And the how comes later. Like, how we get there is like, okay, we've identified the what and the why, and now let's build out a roadmap and let's think about how we deliver those things in order to get to that outcome. So it's really about starting at the end and then working your way back.
It makes a lot of sense, and I really liked that when I saw it on your LinkedIn. The other one that stood out to me was, you hear a lot of people talking about the minimum viable product. Yeah. And it gets a bad rap. You guys have turned that into the minimum lovable product instead, right, which sounds way nicer. What is that all about?
Great question. And this is a subject that I probably love and talk about the most, apart from validation. It is MVPs. I think if you start at the problem with MVPs is really the definition that people go by now, and VCs, venture capitalists, they even pre-seed, accelerators, they'll often tell startups to go build an MVP, and typically this is where we see a lot of startups fall down, right? Having been involved in the industry and working with startups for about 15 years, we've seen a lot of them fail because they start with the solution first. They start building an MVP. And this kind of goes back to that one particular point on validation is an MVP is a vehicle to test. It is a lean experiment for you to test your assumptions on, and you can create hypotheses to go back and test. And again, that comes back down to understanding who your customers are. Those two things really are what encompass what an MVP should be. It should be a lean, scrappy prototype, right? Taking a step back from that, we've seen a lot happen, and startups have been building these products and failed to get traction. So we've been thinking a lot about how do we productize our services to make it more palatable for like an off-the-shelf service for startups, right? One that they can just get engaged with. And one of the concepts that we came up with is a minimal lovable product. And really what that is a prototype to test. And we're not compromising on the design and user experience, but we're also very aware that we could pivot. So the whole point is to learn, to test and learn, and you might need to pivot, right? More often than not, MVPs are, when they're at prototype stage, they're scrappable things. Like, you should be able to create them quite leanly and then move on. What they're not is a means to start production. They shouldn't be production ready assets. It's not what they are. So the whole premise of a minimal lovable product is that we're doing everything in terms of validation and getting customer insights in order to get to that conviction to say, yes, press the green light. We can go build this thing now. We can assemble a team when they actually build this, whether it's a platform or a mobile application.
The other thing that I'm really interested in hearing you talk about is a little bit about you guys' like design ethos and your attention to detail. Because I just can tell my design eye sees your website's design eye, and I would just love to hear your 2 cents on how you got such an awesome looking website going. I know it's like what you do, but I feel like everyone's going to go onto it and be like, yeah, I get it. I need to hear about it.
Absolutely. I mean, design for me is born out of passion, really, and it's all that I've ever done. Being a junior visual designer 16 years ago and working my way through digital and user experience and seeing the shift in startups and an increasing traction on digital products and SaaS platforms. I think for us, I mean, what you probably don't see is that website took about 6 months to build. And there's like many reasons why that took so long to build, and it kind of goes against everything that I'm telling clients to do, because I'm telling clients to make decisions like really quickly, and we're going to create something that isn't perfect. Like, it isn't this like dream user experience with like every pixel is like perfect. It's just, that isn't the case. But the website for us, that's our shop window. That's everything that we care about. So we really took the time to design and curate the content. And I'd be nowhere, by the way, without my wife who wrote that content for me. She wrote the copy, and I actually owe it all to her, really. I really just formed the design around what she'd written. So yeah, the design and development took about 6 months worth of time, and it is something that very much needs updating. But have we got another 6 months? Probably not. So just to go back to your question there about design, it's something that I deeply care about. It's all that I've personally ever done, and the team care about user experience. They care about adding those moments of delight. They care about talking to users and customers. They care about creating value, creating a product that people love. That's the whole reason why we exist. And if you can create like some badass tack sharp design whilst you're doing that, then we're all for it.
What would your tips be for someone who needs to build a good online visual presence, like a website or an app, but they can't bring in a professional to do it yet?
Absolutely. Don't take 6 months to build it. There's so many tools out there that enable us to like build websites like pretty quick and to like great effect, like high quality websites. So tools like Webflow, it's like the first thing to come to mind, right? A lot of people find the learning curve for Webflow. It's quite an easy platform to learn. It seems like we can develop websites quite quickly and effective and responsive in that platform. I would highly recommend not focusing on the minute detail. Just get something. If you don't have something already, get something up there. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you've got all the time later on when you've acquired your first clients, you can refine it later. Don't do what we did. But it's just that's part of being a designer, for sure. Okay,
and then moving on to our final question. It's always left by the previous guest. It's actually quite a nice one for you today. They want to know, what is your favorite thing? Like, what's your favorite area to work on in your business and why?
Wow, good question.
A nice one, isn't it?
Yeah, my favorite thing. I like, again, going back to being a designer, we work with a lot of contractors and freelancers, and that's part of the Intrface model. But I like to get, very hands-on and in the trenches and help with the design, because that is, again, it's where my passion is. That's where I prefer to spend a lot of the time. But really, where I should be spending the most of the time is probably sales and marketing, right? That's probably the thing that is my personal downfall. But I think there's something to be said for trying to get a balance of like, you know, being very hands-on, but also trying to run a business as well.
Got it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries.
It's been a good chat.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on.